So today we have a random spontaneous trivia question, and you need to figure out the name of the song and the artist from these few lyrics I'm about to read. First one to shout it out wins the big prize. Heroes often fail, and you won't read that book again because the ending's just too hard to take. No. I'd walk away like a movie star who gets burned in a three-way script. I really thought some of you guys would get this one. I really thought, yeah. Heroes often fail, and you won't. Oh, good. And the song is called?
Oh my gosh, I know this.
I'll give you half the prize. If you could read my mind, you did good. That line, who gets burned in a three-way script. Common thing is he's talking about a love triangle. What Hollywood and movies and things and books. A love triangle. What happens in a love triangle? Someone gets left out. The triangle many of us are familiar with, but not necessarily the details. A story of David and Bathsheba. And look at that next part. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. I bet it displeased most anybody reading the story. And people know the story. I'm kind of, preaching to the choir. Maybe everyone's got this stuff figured out. But there is a chain reaction we just saw here. It's one thing to stay home and not go to war, whatever the reason was. It's another thing not to be able to sleep or get up from your bed and go out and look around. But you saw something. But you didn't have to stare. You didn't have to plot and plan. So it went from one step to the next step. You might have been curious, but you didn't have to inquire as to who she was. But he did. You certainly didn't have to invite her over, and yet he did that. This led to an attempted cover-up and finally murder. Psalm 51. And the pretext to it, there's a title to it. It says, for the director of music, a psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. He writes this after Nathan had come to him, after he had just condemned himself, after he's been found out. What does he say in his song? Verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. Forgive me. And what does he base it on? The way who God is. God is a God of judgment, but he's also a God of love. In fact, some people have a hard time putting those two together, and maybe you didn't have the best parents. But I grew up in such a situation. I'm not saying my parents were perfect, but I loved my father. I know he loved me. You couldn't tell me he didn't love me. I still don't want to make him mad. There was both, and there'd be consequences. Well, he says, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. So, yes, sin can cascade, and God can still use you if you've failed. That is the important message today. You are not irrevocable. God is so big that he can even use your words as Holy Scripture. Guess what? Not the only time God has done that. Do you know Moses was guilty of murder? He wrote all sorts of books in the Old Testament. Right? King David clearly kept on writing Holy Scripture here. How about the Apostle Paul? Breathing out murderous threats against arresting people. He said, I was a violent man, a persecutor, and a violent man. God used him to write Holy Scripture. Well, if God can take a murderer and make them a penman, for God, God's pen in his hand, what could he do for you in spite of your past?